Hey, this is Evan Marquette, dating coach for smart, strong, successful women, your personal trainer for love. Thanks for coming back to the Love You podcast. It is my pleasure to be here today. Hopefully it's a sunny day by you in the middle of the summer. I'm in good spirits. I'm looking forward to sharing today's observations with you. If you are a big fan of the Love You podcast, even if you're not a fan of the Love You podcast, please share this with a friend. Maybe at the end when you feel better about it. Share this with a friend. Give us a positive review. Apple, Spotify, wherever you are, wherever you get your podcasts. Say something nice, and I'll repay it in good karma with more straightforward dating advice that empowers women. In the meantime, there's a topic that kind of comes up a lot, especially in coaching when people are going through my Love You program. And it is finding that sweet spot between expressing your needs and telling a guy how to please you and having boundaries and being secure and easygoing. And it's a very blurry line. And I think people tend to struggle with it. And so I wanted to spend some time talking about not just what's reasonable for needs, but very specifically when you should be able to talk about this stuff. Because timing matters a lot. And so we're going to get into that. We're going to break into its component parts today. But first, here's a few use case examples of when this becomes tricky. He hasn't been texting enough, but you want to hear from him more. He's been texting, but you want him to call. He's been asking you out, but always at the last minute. He's been choosing inexpensive dates, and you want him to step it up. He's been seeing you for a few months, but his profile is still active. He's been adequate in bed, but he's not exactly knocking your socks off. He's been your boyfriend, but you don't feel like you're getting any closer or building momentum. So as I've intimated, I've done quite a few episodes of the Love You podcast on the difference between having needs and being needy. And there's a wonderful quote. I always forget if this was from 5 Love Languages or Attached. It sounds like it could be from both. But the quote is, "You're only as needy as your unmet needs," which is to say that a good partner values your happiness, wants to do everything in his power to do it. Doesn't mean he's always capable, doesn't mean he's going to get it right. But from the baseline is he actually cares about you and prioritizes your needs. And you're not going to be satisfied if you're with a guy who doesn't take care of your needs. So this presents us with 3 timing questions as to when you should be able to have these deeper discussions about getting your needs met. So the first question, number 1, is he your committed partner yet? Is he your boyfriend yet? Because if he's not your boyfriend, it's generally a little bit too soon to talk about your needs because he's not bought in. So way too many people, and I would say this about men and women alike, I happen to coach women, present from the get-go to a total stranger, here's my laundry list of needs, here's the things that I've discovered on the internet that are my boundaries, here's what I learned in therapy, right? And we're very focused on what we didn't get from our previous relationships that we know we have to get from the new guy. So suddenly it becomes like, I figure these things out. These are my baseline, right? We just talked with Thais Gibson. We talked about my core wounds, and I figure that out. And this is what I need from a man moving forward. And it feels like you've had a revelation, like you found Jesus, and now you want to tell the new guy that you found Jesus. And that is just not something that goes down that easy. Certainly not at the beginning. We sometimes conflate with having needs with thinking that we have the right to express it. And there's a big difference between telling the server at your table that you don't eat gluten and right. And that might not be the best analogy. So let me walk that back. But I think we treat this in a really cavalier, glib way without thinking, is this the right time to share this with someone? You're often telling a guy who you've barely met. You might be a face on a dating app. You might have texted a few times. You might have gone on a few dates. You might have even hooked up once or twice, but you've only been on 3 dates or something like that. And so now you're treating him like he's a boyfriend as if he needs to be responsive to you. And if we do a quick role reversal and you've got a guy who is telling you, after 3 dates that his needs are X, Y, and Z, however reasonable they might be, your first reaction might be like, dude, I've only met you 3 times. You don't get to tell me how I need to show up as a girlfriend with you. I haven't taken the job yet. So everybody has needs. My presumption is that your needs are reasonable. I think we often rush into having these conversations with people before they're ready to have it and discovering that the timing is wrong. You can't tell a dude that you've just met that you want him to pick up every check, that you want him to plan a week in advance, that he has to have the same hobbies and eating habits as you, and that he has to know his intentions very clearly with you when he hasn't signed on the dotted line yet. Patience is your friend. And it's really hard to have because nobody wants to get hurt. Nobody wants to waste time. But if you try to tell a guy how to please you too early, he will often opt out of trying to please you. And that doesn't mean he's a selfish person. It's because he doesn't want to be in a relationship with someone who makes demands on him and doesn't really care about his needs in the same way. Very rarely do we go into a date saying, here's what I'm going to do for you. Right? That's not how we operate. We say, here's what I want you to do for me. Right? And that's a very human endeavor. We're focused on our own self-interests. I think the beginning of the relationship is the time to put aside your agenda and focus on exploring, being open, making a connection. What we say in Love You is comfort, fun, and attraction. And as long as there's comfort, fun, and attraction, we can continue to build. Then we cross a threshold. Okay, it's been 6 weeks. I like you, you like me. We've been on 8 dates. We've come close to sleeping together. Let's take down our profiles and making this official. Now you got yourself a boyfriend. Now you have a greater right to tell the guy who signed on the dotted line how he can please you. So then the second question is he doing his best to meet your needs? So that's also a really interesting topic. I've talked about it before. We all have kind of a rule book in our head that we want other people to follow. The problem is nobody has the same rule book. And what makes me happy as a man might be different than what makes my neighbor happy. And what makes my wife happy might be different than what makes you happy. And so we are all entitled to have our own rule books. It doesn't mean that everybody has read your rule book. It doesn't mean that everybody has the capability to give you the thing that you want the most. And it doesn't mean that compromising on it is inherently out of the question either. There are things that only you can get from a boyfriend, but there's also things where there should be some measure of wiggle room. So it's a few months in, he's your guy, he's accepted the job, and he's not a mind reader. And so you have absolutely the right to share with him and how to communicate your feelings in an effective way. I have cited it before. I will cite it again. I'm sure there's a million books on it, but the best book I know on getting your needs met so that a guy listens to you and wants to honor you is Kiss Your Fights Goodbye by Dr. Jamie Turndorf. It's nonviolent communication, and you're validating him. Hey, Brad, you're a great boyfriend. I love the way you show up in my life. I haven't met a guy in a really long time that I could let down my guard with and trust. When you do X, when you stay out late with your guy friends, when you don't text me back before you go to sleep at night, it makes me feel anxious, needy, neglected, all things that my previous relationships made me feel, right? I know that's not your intention. I know you care. I love the way you're showing up, but it would make me really happy if you did Y. And then you present it to him, and then a reasonable guy is going to try to meet your very reasonable needs. If he's a guy who doesn't make plans in advance, I love it when you make plans 3-4 days in advance, right? And I'm tired of being the woman who has to come up with everything myself. I've been doing that as a single woman forever. Having a guy in my life like you who I could trust to make good decisions really makes me feel feminine and needed. And it makes me really happy when you do that. So I really want to encourage you when we're talking on a Tuesday, if you could look ahead to the weekend and come up with a plan and just let me know to leave my Friday night open for you. Could you do that for me? I would love that. The guy's going to say yes to that. Whether he does, it's a different story. But as long as the guy's engaging in good faith efforts to make you happy and you're not expressing it, I'm so disappointed in you, you're so selfish, why are you such a bad planner, that's not going to get a guy to listen. So nonviolent communication, good faith, assuming positive intent, showing him how to please you, that is a great way to do things. So First question is he my boyfriend yet? Second question, is he actually engaging with you and doing his best to meet your needs? Then we get to the third question, and this is a much harder question. Are your needs reasonable? And are your needs compatible with his needs? Because it doesn't mean that anybody's wrong if people have different needs, right? So all of us, men and women, think our needs are reasonable. So the question is, can you expect your partner to change to meet your needs? In general, I don't like banking on people to change. If you have to have a relationship where a partner has to fundamentally change who he is to be with you, you're probably better off finding a partner who doesn't need to change and naturally meets your needs. So the issue is that different people have different values, as I've shared in previous podcasts. I am very big on productivity, efficiency, punctuality. I'm the super type A guy. My wife is different. And if I had tried to insist that my wife become me for us to be compatible, I wouldn't have a wife, I wouldn't have kids, I certainly wouldn't be in the position to be able to do this podcast with any measure of authority. My wife is not that person. She's a procrastinator. She stays up late. She wakes up late. When she gets mail, she will let it pile up for an entire month where I will literally rip the mail open when I'm coming back from the mailbox. We are different people, but we can still coexist as a couple and respect each other's differences. That doesn't mean I have to change to be more laid back like her, nor does it mean she has to change to meet me. These are places where people could agree to disagree. And that's very, very different than a guy determining that quite reasonably you want a guy who doesn't yell at you, a guy who's faithful to you, a guy who prioritizes you. Those are very core needs in terms of how he treats you. So how I treat my electric bill is very different than how I treat my wife. And my wife, in turn, is the same way. So I think we have to get present to the difference between there's how he treats me and how I feel, right? And this is a reasonable thing to ask, because there are women who want guys to text them 42 times a day and have a drawer in the guy's place. And right, they place a whole series of demands that reasonable people can't always meet. And so you don't want to set yourself up for failure. Everybody has different priorities. Expecting that guys are going to meet you exactly where you're at is often assuming that you need to date someone who is a clone of you, where, I don't know even how to say this any better. You've dated a whole bunch of people before you've listened to this podcast. This isn't your first rodeo. This isn't your first podcast. This isn't your first relationship. So I think we really want to reward guys who get 90% of the job done and then once again might fail 10% of the time. But the things they're failing on are not things that have anything to do with character, kindness, consistency, communication, commitment. Right? There are things that we could work around. There's things that we could paper over, because each man isn't your project. And he's not a puzzle to solve. He's not a problem to fix. He didn't hire you as his girlfriend to become his consultant and tell him all the things he's doing wrong, unless you'd want to be in a relationship with a man who's constantly ticking off all the things that you can do better. You could stand to lose 10 pounds. You could stand to hang out with my guy friends more. You could stand to, oh gosh, you don't want to be with that guy. And so having tolerance for disagreement is paramount in all relationships. Not major disagreements, minor disagreements where you could let someone who's different from you coexist and fill your cup and do it to the best of his capacity without deciding to cut him off. So there's nothing wrong with deciding a guy can't meet your needs. I've showed him, I told him what to do, I've been patient, I did my part, he's not getting it done. Great, you're the CEO, you have every right to fire him. What I don't want you to do is stay in a relationship and constantly feel needy, dissatisfied, drained, in a constantly criticizing place. You are better off being alone and finding a better man than to be in a relationship where you have to constantly criticize. You have to be content with your relationship for it to endure for the next 30 years. So once again, listen to your emotions. Your emotions don't lie. If you don't trust your emotions, if you don't trust your judgment, please find me. My name is Evan Mark Katz. This is the Love You Podcast. evanmarkkatz.com/now. Book a time with me. I'm on summer break. I will get back to you, schedule a time to talk, get to know you better. And as always, if you enjoy the Love You Podcast, give us a positive review, subscribe, share with a friend. I love you. I appreciate you. I thank you for being part of my world. I look forward to our next conversation next week. Take care. Bye-bye.